Okay.
This meeting is
Oh,
being recorded.
Whoa.
that was loud. Got it.
Welcome, everybody, back to Good Muscle Hustle Radio. I've got Eric Benjamin, PA, with us today. Give them just a little quick about you and what you're doing right now and like the people you work with and kind of that whole overview real
All
fast.
right. So, as Alex said, I'm Eric Benjamin. I'm a PA. I work at a internal medicine kind of family health clinic. We see everybody from 13 years old on up. We do a lot of chronic disease checkups where we see people every 3 months for diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, just all kinds of things, really. And then we also do yearly checkups for everybody. We send them to the right specialists and all that. So we're kind of seeing everything. A general population. It's a very diverse area where I'm at. So we're in the DC area. So, you know, we see it all out here. But yeah, I've been doing that now for 3 years. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
yep.
So the kind of the direction we're going to take with this podcast in general is more onto the diabetes side of things and kind of discuss as much into that without going too deep into the weeds of it. And we'll kind of we'll kind of see where the conversation goes, but we'll kind of wrap through and see if, we can talk about diabetes itself and then how people can begin to improve not only their lives, but if they do have either, coming close to it or actually do have diabetes too, how they can improve that and potentially like take it away.
Sounds good.
So let's start with what brings about type 2 diabetes, or how does that happen for people?
So, type 2 diabetes, there is a genetic component to it, but basically what happens is it's a metabolic disorder. It comes about by eating way too many carbohydrates, which we do here in the US, and not exercising. So, there's an obesity component to it. What we have found is that fat tissue actually releases hormones and other chemicals that are not good for you. And what happens is become insulin resistant to where type 1 diabetes, your pancreas doesn't work at all. Type 2 diabetes, your pancreas is still working, producing insulin, which is used to bring blood sugar into the cells. So you're still doing that, but now your cells don't care that you release insulin and they leave blood sugar out there. And the other thing is you're releasing so much insulin all the time because you're drinking sodas or just eating carbs. So your body just becomes less sensitive to it. And your beta cells in the pancreas that release insulin, sometimes they don't work as well either. So there's two things going on there that usually cause diabetes.
So you kind of touched on it already, like the difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is something that people are just born with, like this, the pancreas doesn't work at all.
Yeah, so usually it happens in childhood and it's an autoimmune thing. For some reason, your body produces antibodies against those cells in the pancreas that make insulin and it just attacks them, kills them all, and they quit working
Yes.
completely. So no insulin at all anymore.
Okay. And then type 2 is there's a
Type
genetic
2,
component to it, but essentially
yep.
it's more so just the lifestyle that we have.
It is a lifestyle illness, really, to be honest. There is a genetic component, like if your parents have type 2 diabetes, you're more apt to get it, but it doesn't mean you're gonna get it. It is a lifestyle situation. You can completely cure yourself of type 2 diabetes.
So let's go off of that and kind of go into the details of essentially what roles or role does insulin play and how that kind of in turn um, goes into diabetes. So what does, I guess, to rephrase the question, what
Yep.
does insulin do?
So when you eat, um, your blood sugar goes up. Even if you eat a healthy meal, your blood sugar goes up, and you have to absorb that into your cells of your body because we use sugar, glucose, for energy. So you eat sugar, you have sensors, kind of like a car, and it tells your pancreas we need to release insulin. So you release insulin. To make it simple, insulin fits into this little uh, spot in the cell, and when it fits into that spot, the doors basically open, and they can suck in all the sugars out of the bloodstream. You don't want to leave it out there. So that's what insulin does. It tells the cells to take in blood sugar and remove it from the bloodstream. And then once it takes it in, it can use it for energy and do its stuff. But if you don't have insulin, you just leave blood sugar in the bloodstream.
So what are the effects or the side effects of blood sugar or blood or sorry sugar being in the blood if insulin isn't working and it's just kind of floating around?
So with high blood sugar, a lot of times you won't have any symptoms for a while, but you get really thirsty. So you're drinking a lot more. You're going to be peeing a lot more. You can kind of just feel sluggish and you just don't feel so good. Um, but a lot of times when I find that somebody has diabetes, like I diagnose them with that by doing some blood work, they don't even know. There's a spectrum of that. Sometimes, usually, they don't even know. But on the other end, I've had a guy come in and he wrote down a list of all these things that were bothering him. He was going to the bathroom all the time. He had headaches. He was tired. He was dizzy. He just didn't feel himself. And I'm like,
Mm,
sounds like you have diabetes, and his blood sugars were through the roof. Um, so yeah, but you don't. But usually, you don't even know.
wow.
Yep.
And so left untreated or you don't do anything about type 2 and you kind of leave sugar in the bloodstream for however long, what are some of those negative side effects from?
Yeah, so when you don't treat it, your blood sugars can go up. So normally your blood sugar levels, if you get a blood test, your fasting blood sugar should be from like 70 to 99. So I've seen people end up in the ER because their blood sugar goes up to like 1200, and they basically lose consciousness. Yeah, so you can get sweaty and feel weird and lose consciousness. The reason for that is so you have all this blood sugar out there, but you're not able to pull it into the cells, so your cells don't have any food. So like brain cells
Mm,
and every other cell in the body have no energy source anymore because you're either not producing insulin or your body's not sensitive. So the blood sugar is just sitting in the bloodstream, and you're freaking pass out because you have no energy at all.
wow.
Yep.
And having sugar in the blood can kind of deteriorate or affect nerves, and I know like swelling of the limbs and potentially like losing limbs as well. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So the long-term high sugars, there's a bunch of chemical reactions that happen that we don't need to go into, but it basically puts a lot of pressure. So your cells, if your blood sugar is high and you're able to suck that blood sugar into your cells, back in high school biology, you learn that we use ATP for energy. So you're actually able to make tons of ATP. And what happens is there's so much blood sugar out there, and you're using oxygen to process it. you end up with this reactive oxygen species just out there in your body, and oxygen is very reactive. It starts to destroy things. It can change the molecular composition. There's a lot of biochemistry in there that we can skip over, but basically, like the tiny little things will be the first to be damaged. The little nerve endings, the tiny little blood vessels, and that's why diabetics, if it's uncontrolled, will lose feeling in their feet because their nerves start to die. The other thing is that with that high blood sugar, your mitochondria are the ones that remember, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Mhm.
Um, they actually process all that sugar. Well, they are over processing, and all that reactive oxygen destroys them. And so
Mm,
now you have mitochondria that aren't able to do their job, and your nerve cells just start to die. The other thing is you get a thickening in the body. So it's an inflammatory thing. Sugar is very inflammatory. Um, it's terrible for you, actually. So it will start to thicken your blood vessels everywhere. And so heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, all that stuff is more common in diabetics because of that inflammatory process that's happening because all this extra sugar everywhere. It's just terrible. If you don't control it, is it's actually easier nowadays to live with HIV than it is
wow.
to be diabetic. HIV, you take a pill a day and you can get your viral load to zero, to where it's like you don't even have it. But diabetics, you have to work on your diet. You have to take medication sometimes, and you just it's hard, you know. And if they don't control it, I've actually seen a guy come into the clinic and he's like his toe smelled, and he was very unhealthy. Also.
Yikes.
He was also a smoker, and he took his big toe and spun it all the way around. Wasn't even attached anymore.
Holy cow.
And I'm like, "Bro, what is going on?" And it stunk, obviously, because it didn't
It's just,
obviously didn't have a blood supply
yeah,
anymore.
it's just dying.
So the guys said, "You have to go to the hospital." Like,
Wow.
his toe was removed, obviously, but that is at its worst. That's why people will get toes amputated, legs amputated, because basically the cells just die with all that extra blood sugar.
So over time, essentially, would you say like with diabetes too, if someone doesn't take even, the smallest little things to improve it, it can um, shorten your life and make just like your life kind of harder overall
Yeah,
for
so
however long you do live.
yeah, I always tell people I don't feel like it's my job to make them live longer. I just want them to enjoy the time they have, because when it's our time, and we're gonna go. So
Okay.
with diabetes, if it's uncontrolled, their life's gonna be pretty terrible. They're gonna have a lot of pain,
Yeah.
blindness, kidney failure, strokes, heart attacks, and then you got to live with all those problems, all those issues. It's not a good life. Just if your feet always feel like they're on fire, I mean,
Yeah.
that's terrible, you know? And then if you have a stroke and lose some
Mm,
abilities,
yeah.
you got to live with that. So uncontrolled diabetes, I always tell people you're for sure headed for a not so enjoyable life if you do not control it. So, you know, I try to make it as scary as possible so they know what they're in for, so that they will make an effort, because
Yeah.
you can cure yourself of this and get off all your meds. I've had that happen too.
Yeah. So off of that, like let's go into kind of like what helps type 2, what can people do, and again, like it's not insanely hard, right?
Right.
So let's dive into like how we can begin
Yeah.
if
So
you're at that point.
you gotta, take it one step at a time. But if you look big picture, if you look from, 1,000 feet up, diet control and exercise. And the reason for that is less carbohydrates and sugars, and exercise. You use a lot of energy when you exercise, so you suck up a lot more sugar. So just exercise alone. If you take a walk instead of sitting on the couch, you will burn up a lot more sugar, and that alone will make your blood sugars come down. And then, of course, not consuming as much sugar also. So you have to start looking, you have to start not just counting calories, but counting carbohydrate calories and eat more complex carbs. Normally, if somebody comes in and we haven't gotten into A1C or anything, but if their A1C is really high, like too high, and it's like, we got to do something now, and you need to start lifestyle changes, I'll start them on medication to help lower their blood sugar. It basically, the medication will help their pancreas work better and help them be more sensitive to insulin so that they can remove some blood sugars. And then you have to start
Do
exercising
something
and watching your diet.
for that. So with medication, if someone were to be on some kind of protocol for medication, but they didn't do anything else, like no diet or anything, what would I guess what would the improvements be, and would they be even lasting, or what would that look like? Maybe like just kind of a better
Yeah,
life.
so we have really good medications out there now. Um, The problem with the really good and newer ones is they're very expensive, so some insurances will not cover them, and they're about $1,500 a month if you were to pay out of pocket. No
Wow.
one really can afford that. So, you can though, with medication alone, we can really get those blood sugars way down. But every medication has side effects. So then they got to deal with side effects of medications.
Mm,
A lot of times it's like GI distress, like diarrhea, just, they're never really feeling that great. It also can have an effect on kidney function over time. So you got to watch that. Some of these medications can make their blood sugar too low, and it's just hard to, depending on how they're eating, it's hard to maintain it. So it's going too high and too low. It is easier. I mean, it's not easier for the person, but it's easier to maintain a level blood sugar with regular exercise and diet control than it is with medications. But I do have people that just don't do anything else besides take meds. And we can get things under control, but their overall health is not as good as somebody that includes diet and exercise.
got it.
Yep.
Um, okay, let's see what else I've got on here. Besides medication and improving diet and adding exercise, are there any other things that you've seen help people besides that, or is that kind of the general, like, this is what it is, like you gotta address the nutrition side, you gotta add a little bit of exercise, and
I
that's
mean,
about
yeah, really the main thing with when I diagnose somebody with diabetes, sometimes it takes a little bit for it to click because it's really and I tell this to everybody, diabetic or not, it's a life change. You need to change your life outlook, and you need to, if you want to be a healthy person, that's the first step. You have to just say, I want to be healthy. I don't want to just go to work and go home and not do. So
right.
if your life is just work, and that's where you get all your importance from, you're not really going to care about your health. I mean, that's what I see in my patients. But if you're like, well, I want to enjoy my grandkids, I want to enjoy life, I want to be able to ride, my bike or do whatever, um, you have to make that switch in your head. You have to make that switch and look at food differently, look at exercise differently, and treat it like a lifestyle change. I hate the word diet. And I don't like people to say, I'm going to get on this new diet because it won't last. You have to do something that will last. And the exercise you do has to be something you enjoy, or you're not going to do it. So I think more important than anything else is to make that switch in your mind to decide, okay, I want to be a healthy person because I want to enjoy my life more. And then from there, yes, if you need what we will do medically is we will do medication and it will help a lot, but diet and exercise is really the most important thing if you want to be fully healthy person. Because the other thing is, um, we're a biological body. Your body's always rebuilding its parts from bones to brain cells to everything. It's always rebuilding. Um, so for your bones, for example, which include your joints, they break that every day. You have cells that break down bone and then build it right back up. So that's how you maintain calcium levels and stuff like that. If you go to work and sit all day, and then you come home and eat and sit on the couch and watch TV every day, you do not stress the bones out, and they actually grow thinner and thinner. The density of your bones gets less and less, which osteoporosis in the long run. But same with your joints. Your joints will break down faster and all that. So if you don't use the body for movement, because that's what it is actually made for, everything starts to break down. And it's the same with your brain. I've seen people retire and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I finally retired. I can just sit in my lazy boy and watch TV the rest of my life." If they actually do that, they decline mentally and physically very quickly. People that stay active, that volunteer, that will like take free college courses, and just they're out like doing little hikes and exercise and stuff like that. Like I see young 80-year-old people. There's an old 80-year-old and there's a young 80-year-old, and the people that are staying active in things, they're a young 80-year-old. I mean, they look better than a lot of 60-year-olds. So it's all these are choices we have to make. And the thing is like start small. I'm always telling people
Yeah.
if you can only walk around the block after work because you're winded after that, then that's where you start. And you just do that for starters and you just build upon that, you know.
Yeah. It's like you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will say, "Oh, my knee hurts, so I'm not gonna run anymore." Okay, well, stop running, but you gotta do something else.
Yeah.
Like, you will slowly I mean, injuries are terrible,
Yeah.
because you have a very active it's a lot of times you see a very active person that blows out a knee or has a disc in the back that ruptured or something, and it takes them out, which it will. You have to rest for a while, but then they never get back into exercise. And that's, I think, a trainer like yourself or a good physical therapist to get them back into exercise and then find exercise that's good for them to do. Because once we stop doing that, man,
Yeah. It
things just go
goes.
downhill.
Yeah. I liked what you said earlier, about the the identity side of things of like and essentially like I think two big components of like identity and your why. So when this happens or they get to this point, whether I feel like a lot of times it's obviously their habits and their lifestyle led to this, but it's also, they don't intend to like have diabetes too, or they're not necessarily conscious of like, I'm going to give myself diabetes too, they get to this point and depending on, how long this runway was, we tend to identify whether it's conscious or unconscious as something,
Yep.
and then however we do identify, our habits align with that. So I like what you said, like being able to say, like I want to be a healthy person, and then working on actually identifying as a healthy person, and then you can kind of lead that into like, okay, well, what does a healthy person do?
Yep.
And a healthy person would, whatever, walk more, eat better, and all those other things. And then you can kind of see or bring awareness to like, this is the kind of person I want to be. These are the habits that create that person. Because I think people miss that part. Like they'll come see you and it's like, hey, just fix me.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of like up here that needs to happen in order to create, like you said, like the lifestyle change itself.
Yeah.
Um, so I like that. And then it kind of goes into your why. Like, you know, I'm sure you've seen fairly young people coming on to like, either having diabetes too
Yeah.
or almost there. And, you know, a lot of times, we want to do shit still. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people work through the 20s and 30s, and then they have some kids and stuff, but they never really get to do anything, and they have this like, oh, I want to go do some stuff eventually. But if you get to this point where you have these health problems, and you don't have a
Yeah.
plan to address them, then going on trips and like going on hikes and shit like that becomes unrealistic. So understanding also like, why do you want to be healthier? Like, how will that change your life? Like,
Yeah.
what will the next 5 years look like if you do make a change? And I think, like you said, like those two things are super important for people to
Yep.
think about.
It is. It is. It's very important. And the sad thing with my profession is that I get 15 minutes per patient usually. So half an hour at the most if it's like a yearly full physical and everything. But 15 minutes every 3 months is not enough
Yikes. Yeah.
for me to help them make choices and changes and mindset. So I do my best to talk to them about that, but then it's like me handing them off to somebody like yourself to where you
Mm.
can actually work with them on a weekly, daily, monthly
Yeah.
basis. Because once again, sad to say, insurance will only let them see me like every 3 months to do new labs and stuff. And it's just not enough. I'll go over their lab results with them and say, "Oh man, your A1C is still high," and like, "What are you doing?" And most people don't. Most people don't track their nutritional
Right.
stuff. And so I try to tell them to do that, and but I see it once somebody makes that switch like you're talking about, and they have a reason and the motivation. I want to be healthy. I want to get off these meds. Um, that is so important.
Yeah.
We get so caught up, us adults, into our jobs,
Yeah.
and that is our identity. And so, especially I'm in the DC area, there's a lot of stressful jobs up here, and people just go to work. There's a ton of traffic up here. They drive home. So it's like a 12-hour day, and then they get home,
Yeah. Do
they don't want to
anything.
do anything. They're tired. And I get that. I'm tired sometimes too after work, but and some days I do have to force myself to go to the gym, but I know I'm going to feel better after I go to the gym.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's that mindset though. If you don't have it, it's just like smoking. And I know I'm
Yeah.
rambling here, but there's medications to help you stop smoking, but I always tell people, I'm not gonna give you these meds until you are ready and you tell me, "I am ready to stop smoking. I really wanna stop." And once they do that, then I'll do the meds. Now, I don't do that with diabetes because we gotta get their blood sugars down because you know,
Yeah.
we can easily get their blood sugars down with meds, but you gotta make that switch in your mind.
Yeah. It's have you read the book Atomic Habits?
No.
It's a good one. It's a good one. But he has a thing on there on it's along the lines of the identity
Oh,
idea.
yeah.
And he does have like an example of smokers, and he sets up the scenario of like, all right, there's two people that are trying to quit, and you ask person one, do you want a cigarette? And they say, oh no, I'm trying to quit. And then you ask person two, and they say, oh no, I'm not a smoker. Who's going to see
Oh,
this longer term, or maybe never smoke again? Probably person two, more
yeah,
likely, because they no longer even identify as a smoker, while the other person is still identifies inside as a smoker, but they're like
yeah,
trying to quit. So that's super important. That's like a big, even for like all my recent coaching stuff, is like a huge pillar now, because I like, obviously in the health and fitness space, like nutrition and exercise, obviously, like, yes, that's
yeah,
important, but being able to touch in on the identity and the why creates I think, a much more emotional reason, and
Yeah.
we're emotional people. And if we're
Yep.
there, if there's no emotional tie into anything, and it's just surface level, like, well, I just want to, you know, be skinny for summer or whatever, then
Yeah.
most of the time, from my experience, anyways, like people either don't reach their goal because they're looking for this motivation when motivation is fleeting and it's never going to be the same. But if you have this identity change and you have a very important emotional why, people push through those days where there is no motivation, and they see a lot more of this lifestyle change than just like I just want to lose 10 pounds or whatever. Because
Yeah, it's very true.
yeah,
People will, with everything, people will see themselves as a cancer I have cancer, or they will see themselves
yeah,
as a survivor. And there is a definite mind-body connection with everything,
yes,
from, stomach issues to cancer. But if somebody with diabetes, if they say, "Well, I'm a diabetic," versus I am a healthy
yes,
person and I'm gonna beat diabetes, that's a
mm,
totally different mindset. And if you
yeah,
change your mind, you can change your life. And I know you and I have both seen that in our lives. If you
yeah,
decide this is who I am going to be and I'm leaving that behind, you got to change your mind to change your life. And it does work. But sometimes it's okay to fake it till you make it, I guess.
yeah,
Sometimes if you're overweight and you have diabetes and you say, That's not who I am anymore," and you just start telling yourself, "I am not a diabetic. I am a healthy person." Don't even use the diabetic part of it. Just say, "I am a healthy person." You tell yourself that every day, you will start to change your mindset. And the exercise, I always tell people it's not going to be fun for the first month. You're going to be sore. You're not going to want to go. But after a month and you start seeing results, then you start to
oh
want to
yeah,
go because you started to form a new habit, and it's good for you. So
yeah,
you're right. The wanting to get your beach body or just lose 10
yeah,
pounds. I mean, there's not meaning in that really.
yeah,
There's not like life
yeah,
meaning in those things.
yeah. And then if you get there, mentally you're still, if
Yeah.
you're still
Are
unhappy,
you gonna maintain it? Yeah,
and then yeah, exactly. And then it becomes like, all right, I spend 90 days and I'm going to get here. And then
yeah,
I got there, cool. And then it just goes right back in. So,
yeah,
yeah, being able to change that. And, if you can tell yourself that, you are a healthy person, like you said, every day, like though the habits that align with that phrase or that mentality start to happen. And then
yeah,
those combined lead into that, um, that change in your life.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Yeah, it's important. We don't always, most clinicians, doctors, PAs, whatever, because we're rushing through all these patients every day, we don't take the time to even have this discussion. We're just like,
Yeah.
and I see, no offense to doctors out there, but I see a lot of them that don't even tell the patient why they're doing what they're doing. They're just like, okay, your A1C is high. Here's what they just write the script and they send
There
them
you
on their
go.
way. They don't have
Yeah.
the discussion about anything besides that. And I know some people that have been doing this for a while. I mean, even I realize most people aren't going to make these life changes, but it's still our job to try to get them to do it. But it's just the medical industry in the US has flaws, a lot of
Yeah,
flaws.
for
So,
sure.
sadly, but it's
Yeah.
true. So,
Yeah.
and I've tried to find, where I live, there's a lot of, hospitals and doctors, and it's pretty easy to get people into different places usually. Um, so I've looked for some medical weight loss programs, and most of them are just like drinks and stuff like that, which is not
Yeah.
a sustainable. I
Yeah.
don't
I
like
could
those.
I can
honestly.
rant on that for like an
Yeah,
hour.
I am not a fan of those. They're not sustainable. They're very expensive.
Yeah,
And yeah, they'll get you to lose weight in 3 months or whatever, but then what are you going to do after that? You're going to go
yeah,
back to your old habits. So you're not producing those or making those healthy habits.
yeah,
There are some new medications out there for obesity. They're actually diabetic medications that work for obesity. They work really well. And I think using those in conjunction with lifestyle changes
yeah,
is going to be a game changer, like in the future, as those medicines are more and more covered.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and I think like you were saying with like the health or the weight loss programs and stuff out there, like that's why like that fourth, because like I base my stuff around, 3 pillars, right? Like accountability, exercise, and nutrition. But as I've been having more discussions with people, I've been adding in basically this fourth pillar, which is the whole mental side of this, of like we have to do something, or if anything, bring awareness to what your self-talk is like, how you're identifying with yourself, um, the small habits that we can either take away or add in, or both in
Yeah.
combination to create what we're trying to, this lifestyle change. And that, in my opinion, is like the missing component to the health and fitness industry today, because
Yeah.
it's so like you said, like you can do the whole shake thing and you'll spend 300+ dollars a month on these things, and then but there isn't any education behind why that stuff is working, or like any of the habit stuff of like, we should be consuming, whatever, like calories, macro,
Yeah.
you can go into all that stuff, and like how to actually exercise, and make it and optimize that area, not waste your time and stuff. And, you go through that whole drink thing, and like, yeah, people lose weight a lot of times and they'll lose
Yeah.
a lot of weight. But because there's no habit change or anything else on that mental side, like you said, like, you'll get your 3 months in, and then people go back to what they were doing because
Yeah.
they didn't learn anything besides, oh, I just got to drink this thing. And then they gain, most of the time what happens is people, because they are on those shakes, whatever it is, like 2 or 3 shakes a day, it puts them in a pretty heavy deficit, because they're just drinking food. So
Yeah.
there's not much calories in there. So people lose a lot of weight because they are in this deficit. But because there's nothing else involved, people end up losing a lot of muscle with that. And so
Mhm.
when they go back, they gain all that weight back, and they usually gain all of it plus like another 10 to
Yeah.
15 pounds, because now they have less muscle, and muscle burns more energy at rest. So
Yeah.
now they're actually burning less energy, and that's why they gain that 10 to 15 pounds. And then people go through the whole cycle, and now they're like, oh my god,
Yep.
I'm back to where I was, and now I'm heavier. And that's why these like trendy things keep happening, but there's
Yeah.
no discussion around like, there is habits that we need to address and
Yeah.
build. And it's crazy because like we were talking about earlier, like the habits are small, like small realistic things that people can do that are easy and they can start to do every single day, can surprisingly produce a lot of great results
Yeah.
and help the long-term gain. Like that's always like the main discussion when I talk to people is like, look, even though this is essentially, like a 90-day thing, people tend to train a lot longer than that. But it gives us, enough time to lay the foundation so we can get the ball rolling. But, at the end of the day, like we want to create a lifestyle change so
Mhm.
that, they don't ever have to hire anybody else again. They can just
Right.
realistically maintain a good health and a good life
Yep.
forever.
Yeah, if you do your job well, your patients, well, your clients will graduate from you and not need you anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But you
Yeah.
always have more, so
Yeah. um, yeah. Let's see. We kind of went
that's
off on
okay.
that.
I knew
That's
we
all
would.
right. That was good though. That's good stuff.
Yep.
Um, So with, let's see, um, I guess, I mean, this wouldn't necessarily be, too important for people worried about type 2, but I think I was listening to either like a YouTube or a podcast or something about type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
And so people with type 1, they need insulin because they don't have it. So they need to eat and make sure they like, put insulin in so
Yep.
insulin will do its job. Um, but even on with type 1, like the importance of how like your systems work, like if someone that is type 1 doesn't take their insulin, they can eat a ton of food and not gain any weight, but they also have the sugar in their blood, kind of
Yep.
like type 2, right? Where it's
Yep.
just like in there, and that can also, even though they're skinny, they can also have like really negative side
Yeah.
effects.
Yeah. Yeah. So they have to use insulin. All the other medications won't work for them because they usually help the body produce insulin and help you
Right.
be sensitive to insulin, but they just make no insulin anymore. So they have to use it. And with them, a lot of times they're using insulin pump, which is very cool because it hooks to a glucometer that's in their skin and it will release insulin as needed. It's almost like a fake pancreas. And
Mhm.
so it works to give them insulin. It keeps the blood sugars under pretty good control. And but they, so with that, they can still get overweight. Um, it's less common. I have a ton of people with type 2 diabetes. I have one person right now with type 1. And he has a insulin pump that he loads, and he's a construction worker. He's very
Oh
fit.
wow.
Yep, he's very fit. He exercises, so his A1C is great. But when I first saw him, he was like between insurances or something. He was trying to make his insulin last, so he wasn't giving himself enough. So his blood sugars were going up and up and up. And when I checked his A1C, it was really, really high. And I'm like, okay, we have to do something about this, or he's gonna have all those issues, with high blood sugars. And once again, if your blood sugar is high, your cells don't have sugar. It's just floating around in your bloodstream. So
Right.
that's why you can, pass out, go into a diabetic coma, because your brain doesn't have any energy because the sugars aren't coming into the cells. But anyway, we got him back under control, and he doesn't have any tingling in or pain in his toes or anything. And he's only like in his 40s or something like that. So he's got a lot of life left in him,
Yeah.
and he can live just as long as anybody else and as good a life as anybody else as long as he controls those blood sugars. So, but
Nice.
yeah, type 1 is more of an autoimmune thing. That guy, it happened to him when he was a kid, and usually they won't know. They'll end up in the hospital, passed
Oh
out.
wow.
Yep. Um, but yeah, they can tend to be skinnier because they're not absorbing sugars like they are. So
Yeah.
another sign is your pee might even smell sweet because
Mm,
you're eating out so much
wow.
sugar. Yeah. And it actually fries the kidneys, though. It is not good for the kidneys. But I've like a new patient will come in, he's an older guy or whatever, and hasn't been to the doctor in years just because, people don't always go or they don't have
Yeah.
insurance. We do a urine because we usually do urines on everybody, and his freaking blood, the sugar content of his urine is super high. And I'm like, oh no. And
Yikes.
then, we're seeing his fasting blood sugar is like two or 300 up there. And so we got to control that. But yeah, they used to actually old school doctors before we had all these tests and tools, they would taste the urine and, they could tell you had diabetes because your urine was sweet. I don't do that.
uh, so I have a question.
Okay.
So, let's say scenario someone has diabetes too, and blood sugar is really high, and they're going into like changing their diet a little bit. What would you say or know if like, because like a lot of times people say, well, fruit is good for you, But if someone is in this, type 2
Mhm.
diabetes area, like what is your take on like fruit, or is it kind of like dose dependent, or does it depend on, do they have to bring things back to a controlled point before they're just like
Yeah.
can just eat fruit, or what have you seen with that?
So fruit is tied up in a lot of fiber. So your body has to work to get that sugar out of it a little harder. You got to be, everything in moderation. So if they're eating, they tell me in the morning they're eating like oatmeal with blueberries, and I'm like, okay, that's not bad. Oatmeal, break that down into sugars.
Right.
The fruit, yep, you break that down into sugars too. So, um, they need to add in more proteins. But the oatmeal with blueberries, I'm not gonna say you gotta quit eating that. Sugar cereal like Fruit Loops, cut that out, I would because the carbs that are in breads, pastas, potatoes, any processed food that just you break that down, no problem. There's no fiber in it. So you just break it down quickly, blood sugar goes way up really fast.
Mhm.
Where fruits, you have all that fiber and it's a slower burn, basically,
Okay.
harder to get the sugars out of it. And there's so many macronutrients in fruits that I want them to eat fruit, but in moderation.
Got it.
Their blood sugar will go up when they eat fruit, but I would much rather them eat fruit than to eat
Fruit
chips,
Loops.
Fruit Loops, cookies, and that's the other thing is snacking. People are
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I eat so great," and then I'm like, "Okay, what do your snacks look like?" Chips, what if
Oreos.
Oreo, whatever. They're
Watermelon.
just
Yeah.
bad. And I'm like, change that to like nuts or something like that, pistachios or cashew, whatever, something better that will keep you fuller longer.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is those easy to burn carbohydrates, you just burn through them really quick. If you have something with a higher protein, it keeps you fuller longer.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing too. But fruit overall, I like when people eat fruit is so good for you, but in moderation. So,
Got it.
a serving size.
Got it. With on that kind of same topic of like fruit and stuff, I know with food in general, and like thinking about like macros as like proteins and fats, like if people can have, or prioritize a meal with, because most of the time, with the American diet, it's like a lot of carbs, and then our proteins are, either like bottom, or if there is any, with all the like pastries and chips and shit like that. But if people can prioritize with like a protein source and like a good source of fat,
Yep.
with whatever, if they did have like rice or whatever with that meal, um, is it true that with those things combined in there, like a good protein source, a good fat source in that meal together, do we see blood sugar with a little bit more of like a level rise, instead of just like saying they have like whatever, like a quick carb and their blood sugar shoots? We
Yep.
have like a priority of like, okay, I got some protein, maybe like a little bit of avocado with it.
Yep.
And we see a little bit less of the spike and more of a
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. You won't see the spike as much. And like, surprisingly, some foods like a hamburger, if you eat a hamburger with bread and everything, like from McDonald's or wherever, that will your blood sugars spike like crazy
Really?
on that. Yep, yep, because those it's
Huh.
processed
Yeah,
bread,
right.
it just break down real quick, and, plus there's bad fats and everything in there too, but, yeah, if you eat avocado with some veggies, you got a lot of fiber tied into that, you got some good fats tied so fats are hard to digest, and so your body digests them slower. And so it will slow down the whole process and you'll release fats, calories slower, the sugars slower. And once again, everything in moderation. Some people go nuts and will,
Yeah.
eat carrots until their skin turns orange, but everything in moderation. But yeah, you have to if a balance that's what a balanced meal means. And that's where I don't have time in a 15-minute appointment
Right.
to explain that, and so I tell them you need to eat a balanced meal, but most people don't know what that means. And
Right.
that's, we don't those are things we should learn in school,
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
not frickin', I'd never use geometry. I'm just saying Pythagorean theorem, I don't even remember it. So,
So back on that question, with in with what you know, would it be more important to have more fiber in the meal for this level blood sugar than like say the fats or the protein? Would it
yeah.
be more important for the fiber to be present for blood sugar in general, or is that kind of like a like you said, just a balance, like make sure there's a little bit here and a little bit
Yeah, it is a balance, but fiber itself has so many other benefits, like lower colon cancer, better digestion, because we can't break down plant fiber, the cell walls in plants. We can't digest them, so they just add bulk to our stools, basically.
here?
But a lot of them, there's some soluble fibers that the body uses. It can lower your LDL cholesterol. It lowers your chances of cancers, and it will slow down digestion. But fats and proteins will also do that too.
Okay.
So think about it like a potato, for example, is just glucose molecules all hooked together. That whole potato is all glucose. That's all that's in it.
Got it.
And you break that down, pure sugar. Where a protein has, I mean, we're not going to go into it right now, but it's a big molecule that makes up that protein with amino acids in it. It is really hard to turn that into a sugar. Your body will, like if you just eat tons and tons of proteins, you will
Right.
turn it into sugar, but it is very difficult. Your body won't just break it into sugar, absorb it, and then store it. That's what's happening when you eat carbs. If you only eat enough carbs and it equals your metabolism for the day, then you won't store anything. We eat way more carbs than that. So
Yeah.
your body breaks it down, it goes straight into the bloodstream, and then your body stores it wherever you store fat. So if it's in your butt, you're going to put more fat there. You're just going to break it down and store it.
Got it.
So that's where you got to watch those carbs. That's why carbs are good for you when you eat enough of them. But if you overeat carbs, then you're just going to store it as fat. So back in the day when we were hunter gatherers, and we didn't have stores. So if you happen to find a blueberry bush, we are programmed to eat as many carbs as possible. They're delicious
Yeah.
because back in the day, you'd see a blueberry bush or whatever, you would eat all of them. And then you would store it as fat. And that was good for you because you had to make it through the winter, and all that. Now, we don't need to do that
Yeah.
anymore. We
Now
just
we
store
just
it everywhere, dude. We eat whatever we want. And so we're still designed to love carbs, but it works against us nowadays.
got it. Awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Um, yeah, I think that's good. I think that is a good chunk
Got
right
it.
there. Good
Yeah.
chunk of info.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot to break down. And, that's why people need the help of like your guidance to help them take it step by step.
Yeah.
Because when somebody is diagnosed with pre-diabetes or diabetes, they're just like, when you look at all the information out there
Oh
about
yeah.
nutrition and diet, there's a lot of bad information out there. And the other hard part about it is everybody's a little different. Everybody's metabolism is a little different, but that's why somebody like you can help, break it into bite-sized things that they can
Yeah.
make one change at a time until if they do that for 3, 6, 9 months,
Yeah.
they're a whole different person because they've gotten all these little steps in line, and
Yeah.
now they've become a healthy person,
Absolutely.
which I think everybody wants to be, but it does take work. Like,
There
I
is
do
effort.
tell people, yeah, like when you were talking, it's like it's easy when you break it into small steps, but it takes effort, it takes work. You have to make yourself sometimes go exercise. because you're tired after work, you had a bad day or whatever. The other thing about exercise, though, another tangent, is if you will get your heart rate up 30, 45 minutes at a time, that's not a starting goal, but that's where I want people to get. You start to release extra serotonin, and that is a natural
Mm,
antidepressant. So I have
awesome.
a ton of people on antidepressant medications, and the way they work is they increase serotonin levels in the brain, but you can do that by exercising. And when I ride my bike for long periods of time, I get to a point where when I'm on the bike where I hit that runner's high, as they call it.
Yeah.
That's high serotonin levels, is what that is. And it makes you feel good. You're less stressed. And the other thing is, and this does go along with the high blood sugars and everything. So when we're stressed out at work or home or whatever causes us stress, you release stress hormones. So they're like steroids. It's cortisol.
Right.
Cortisol levels are made for fight or flight responses. So back in the day, if a bear was chasing you, you released cortisol, your blood sugar level went skyrocketed, and you ran away from that bear, or you fought the bear and won.
So you just, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully, or you're dead. But now we don't do that. So we are stressed all day at work. Our
Mhm.
cortisol levels are high. It makes
Ah,
your immune system go down. It
yeah.
also, because you don't need your immune system while you're running or fighting, so your
Right.
immune system goes down, your blood sugars go up, and you then go home and don't burn off that extra cortisol and blood sugar, and you have long-term health effects with that.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's I tell people that every day. It's like you if you want to feel good, not be so stressed out and so overweight, you have to exercise. It's not only good for lowering blood sugars and keeping your joints healthy and making you look physically good, but mentally, it's so important to burn off that extra stress hormone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yep.
Cool.
So there you go.
Right on. I love it. Um, well, thanks for coming on here and
Of course.
talking to everybody. Hopefully, everybody takes something from it. Um,
Yep.
and then wherever I put this, it's probably going to go YouTube and Spotify. So if
Cool.
anyone has extra questions, just post them, and then we can always do a
We
round
can do it
two. And
again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
We'll answer all your questions.
yeah. Thanks again, Dad. And I think that was good. That was good information.
Good. Good. You gonna edit it down and all that stuff?
Let me do